Hi everyone, Bindu here from Crafty Meraki. Before we start with today's projects, I want to share with you the Crafty Meraki website, and I want to show you how easy it is to find things on our website. So on our website, you click on collections, and that brings you to this page where you can see that all the brands that we carry are listed here in alphabetical order. Not only are the brands listed, but as you can see, dyes, distress inks, basically categories, ink cubes, inks, they're listed by brands as well as by categories. So say you're looking for distress inks, you can just go directly to distress inks and buy the distress inks that you're looking for. Oh, and what's this here today? We have a special collection created that has all the products that I'm going to be using in today's demo. So it's clearly called SSBE Demo Products. So you can just go to collections, find SSBE Demo Products, and you can just shop for all the products that I'm going to be using in today's demo. I will also give you the link to the collection so it's easier to find that way as well. Be sure to check out the blog section of the website as well, because the design team shares daily inspiration in this section. In addition to the pictures of their projects, the design team also shares the process that they use to create that card. Here is the card that we're going to be making today. We are going to take a very classic technique, which is embossing, and try to take it to the next level, so to speak. So I'm starting off with pre-cut 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 blue cardstock panels. I have my embossing ink pad, and I have this rose gold embossing powder by Brutus Monroe, which is called Penny. The stamp set I am using is called Wallpaper Flowers by 𝐒𝐿𝐴. I'm basically going to be using all of the images from this stamp set. I'm going to start by prepping my cardstock panel with some anti-static powder so that my embossing powder only sticks where I want it to stick. Next, I'm going to heat emboss in the copper or the penny metallic embossing powder using just the foliage or the leaf images from this set. So I'm arranging my leaves just how I want them to cover the whole panel, and I'm going to use the penny embossing powder by Brutus Monroe, and I'm going to heat emboss this image, this whole background panel. I'm using my Misty stamping tool as always just to make sure that I get a good impression, and I'm going to use my Wow embossing ink, and I will try to double stamp this. Once again, I'm paranoid, just trying to make sure I get a good impression and make sure that the embossing powder sticks to the embossing ink. So here's a quick tip. If you're using the Misty, you see me here using a microfiber towel to rub the Misty door so that I get a good impression. I find that rather than press down on the Misty door, if I use the microfiber towel and just rub in circular motions, I find it easier to get a good impression on the panel. So once I've gotten a good impression on my cardstock panel, I'm going to add the penny embossing powder by Brutus Monroe, and I'm just basically taking my coffee filters and adding on the embossing powder onto this panel. I love this copper penny embossing powder, and I was actually using it for another project, so I just ended up using the same coffee filter with the leftover embossing powder, and I'm just using that on this cardstock panel. I'm tapping off the excess, and I'm now going to go heat set it off camera, but essentially I'm going to repeat this process. So once I'm done heat setting the images that I already heat embossed, I am now adding the images onto the remaining panel so that I get a good even coverage on the background panel. Essentially, I am taking multiple little stamps and making my own background, if you will, rather than using a background stamp. I wanted to really use this wallpaper stamp set, and I wanted to use only one stamp set. That was my challenge for myself. Use one stamp set and get a very unique look from it, if you will. Rather than using a background stamp and then using the flower images from the stamp set, I just tried to use all of the images on that stamp set. This stamp set, Wallpaper Flowers, is actually very popular with watercolorists and Copic colorists, if you will, because it has these gorgeous blooms, gorgeous large flowers that are amazing to color in. I, however, as much as I enjoy watercoloring, like I said, I wanted to give myself a different challenge. I wanted to use this stamp set, which was sitting in my stash for a while, but I wanted to use it different from everybody else. So I came up with this idea of using the smaller images to make a background for my own self. Next, I am actually going to heat emboss the flower images from the stamp set onto vellum using the same embossing ink pad, but this time I'm going to be using white embossing powder. As usual, I'm starting off with prepping my vellum with the anti-static powder, and I'm going to make sure that the embossing powder only sticks where I want it to stick. I'm also double making sure with these two magnets that my vellum doesn't move because it's a lot thinner than regular cardstock. I want to make sure that my panel stays in place while I'm trying to get the ink on the vellum. So I'm prepping my vellum and I'm going to stamp, you'll see me stamp 3 images here onto the vellum. I used a flower, one of the larger flowers of the stamp, and I also used 2 leaf images from this stamp set to heat emboss onto vellum. I ended up not using these 2 leaf images on my card because I felt like it was a bit too overpowering. I wanted that gorgeous copper rose gold background to show a lot more, and so I decided not to use it in the end, not to use these leaf images in the end. But not to worry, I'm going to save them and I'm going to use them for another project I am sure that I'm going to make here very shortly. But once again, you're seeing me gently rub the misty door with my microfiber towel. So once I've gotten a good impression, I'm going to go and heat emboss this with Brutus Monroe embossing powder, which is called Alabaster White. I didn't get a good impression in one spot, so that's why you saw me go back and redo just that one tiny little spot. So now that I have a good impression on my vellum, I am bringing out the Alabaster White embossing powder by Brutus Monroe. I'm just going to add the embossing powder on, I'm going to go heat set it, and then I'll come back. At this point, I am jamming to my music. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I love to play my music while I'm crafting. I just love to listen to music or audiobooks or just something to keep my mind also occupied and focused right? So I don't know if you guys do that. I don't know how many people actually like their peace and quiet versus, people like me who love to just either chat or listen to music. Anyway, I am using a reverse tweezers. This one is by iCraft, and I will link all the products that I'm using today in the SSBE demo collection. But I use this reverse tweezers to hold my cardstock or the vellum when I'm heat embossing. This just helps me not burn myself. Okay, so here is the heat embossed image, or I should say 3 images that I heat embossed. But like I said, I'm only going to use the flower image. So for the next step, I am buffing my cardstock panel. I'm simply taking the microfiber cloth and I'm rubbing off all of that anti-static powder that I put on, or rather I should say I dumped on a whole bunch. And because this is dark cardstock, I want to make sure that none of that powder residue shows through when I make my card. So I'm simply taking my microfiber towel and wiping off all of that excess powder. I'm going to repeat the same thing with the vellum that I heat embossed as well. All of that white powder that stayed on the vellum, I'm simply just trying to wipe off. A quick tip, if you're going to wipe off, make sure to give some time so that the embossing powder actually cools down once you've heat set it. I've made the mistake of going right over it with fabric or a paper towel and made a mess. So don't do that. All right, so my favorite part, fussy cutting. I am taking a brand new pair of Cutter Bee scissors because I couldn't find my other pair that I use only for paper. I've mentioned this before, but the very important tip that I use for fussy cutting is that I do not use this pair of scissors for anything else. I only have a pair of scissors sitting ready for me to fussy cut. So I only cut paper with it. I only fussy cut with this one scissors. I'm not going to use it for anything else. So I'm going to fussy cut this large flower image so that I can use it on my card front. I find fussy cutting very therapeutic, actually. I think I've said this before, but something about this fussy cutting process that just somehow it's meditating to me, I guess, if you will. I'm in a zone. I'm just fussy cutting away. So all I'm doing here is essentially I'm going around the embossing line, making sure that I do not cut into the embossing line. So another tip I can give you here is you see that I cut out sort of a rough area around the flower or around the main image that I want to cut. This way, it gives me more wiggle room, more room for me to sort of cut into rather than me having to cut all the way through from a big sheet of paper. I don't know if that makes any sense, but essentially I'm making the cutting area smaller so that I can do a lot of detailed cutting. So the good thing about these scissors is that the tips are extremely sharp. So you see me here cutting all the way with the tippy tip of that pair of scissors. So I want to keep these scissors the sharpest that I can, and that's why, like I said before, I don't use them for anything else. I just keep them specifically for fussy cutting. So while I'm fussy cutting, fun fact, it's time for a chat, right? So fun fact, did you know that February the 13th, today, is Galentine's Day? How many of you are actually celebrating Galentine's Day today? I have made some plans to go celebrate with my girlfriend. We're going to be socially distancing from other people. We're going to have our masks on, safety first. But I made some plans to be with my best friend at her house. We're going to be making dinner just for the two of us, and we're just going to be chatting. maybe slumber party. I don't know. But February the 13th is Valentine's Day, and I personally feel very strongly about Valentine's Day. And the reason is I think that us women, we need more encouragement. We need to tell each other more that we love each other, we are there for each other, we support each other. I think this is something that cannot be said enough. I think it's very, very understated. And I make a conscious effort to tell my friends how much I miss them, especially over these last few months to a year where we've all been distanced from our loved ones, right? So I feel that it's more important now than ever before to tell our friends how much we love them and how much we miss them. So I plan to have a fun evening with my friend. We're probably going to watch a movie. We're probably going to hang out. There may or may not be some wine involved. I am never going to say. But point being that it's an acknowledgement of our friendship. It's an acknowledgement of all the good times and the bad times that we've had. I am sure there's going to be lots of emotions. But anyway, while I'm chatting away, my fussy cutting is done, and here is the gorgeous bloom that we just fussy cut. I also had fussy cut these leaf images, but like I said, I ended up not using them for this card. Now, all that's left for us to do is to assemble our card. I have my card base here, the heat embossed blue card panel, which I'm going to mount on top of the card base. And I'm also going to actually add this piece of vellum that I used the grid mat and I cut into 1.5 inch. I cut the 1.5 inch wide vellum strip, and I'm simply going to adhere this to the back of the cardstock. This way, the vellum is gonna look like a band, but the glue won't be visible. So I'm simply going to fold over the excess vellum, and I'm gonna flip over the card panel and just add some glue and adhere the vellum to the card panel. Another tip here is that I'm actually trying to, you'll see me do that here in a second, but I'm actually trying to align the card panel with these grid lines so that my vellum goes in straight and it's not wonky when I flip over the card panel. So I almost always use the work surface or the grid mat that I have on my desk, and I try to align my cards, my sentiments, everything using those grid lines on the work surface. So hint, hint, tip for you. All right, so I'm simply going to add glue, and I'm going to glue both sides of the vellum belly band, if you will, onto the blue cardstock panel. And I am going to mount the whole thing onto my card base. So once I'm done gluing the vellum belly band, I'm going to add foam tape because I wanted to mount this whole card panel up on the card base. There's really not much else that I'm adding to this card. I want to keep it very simple from that perspective. And so I'm using a whole bunch of foam tape, and I'm simply going to mount this on top of my card base. By doing the vellum first and then doing the foam tape, the vellum is now going to be hidden, even though it looks like it's wrapping around the card, but it's still hidden, rather than putting the vellum on the inside of the card base, I chose to do it this way. So I'm just making sure that the card panel is adhered to the card base, making sure that the vellum's in place, my final checks. Next, I'm going to take some glue and directly glue on the flower onto the vellum band that we just attached. Fortunately, this flower has a large area in the middle which is covered by embossing powder, and so me adding glue is not going to change anything, hurt anything. Normally when you use vellum, you have to be very careful where you add glue because you don't want the glue to show through the vellum. But in this case, super duper easy. There's a large area in the middle, and I simply dabbed on a few drops of glue and I just attached it to my card front on top of the vellum band that I already have on the card panel. Simple. Voila! All that's left to do on this card now is to add a sentiment. For the sentiment, I wanted to keep it very simple, so I used these sentiment strips that are part of the Crafty Meraki Special Edition watercolor kit, and I'm simply cutting out the strips using my Tim Holtz trimmer. And I'm going to use this sentiment that says sending love, and I'm just going to simply adhere it on top of the vellum panel that we just mounted. So I'm just cutting the sentiment down to size, and I am going to add foam tape to the back and add it on to my card base. Doesn't that penny embossing powder look amazing on this dark blue cardstock? I'm just simply in love. So like I said, all I'm doing is I'm keeping it very simple at this point. I'm just going to add the sentiment that says sending love, used foam tape, and that's it. This card is finished. Look at that gorgeous shine. Like I said, I will be linking all the products that I used today in the SSBE collection on the craftymeraki.com website. Don't forget, we have a show special of 20% off all 𝐂𝐿𝐴 products because today I'm using 𝐂𝐿𝐴 stamps. And I'll get to the code in a second, but here's a look at our finished card. I am simply in love with the stark contrast of this card. I hope you will give it a try too. So for this show special, use code LOVESSBE21 to take 20% off all 𝐂𝐿𝐴 products today and tomorrow. I will see you all again soon with another project. Until then, stay happy, stay crafty. Bye!